The air in the pediatrician's office was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the low-grade anxiety of worried parents. I shifted my sleeping son Ben in my arms, his forehead warm and damp against my neck. We'd been back in the city for less than a month, and the transition had already gifted him a nasty cold. I was mentally calculating the cost of the inevitable prescription when I looked up and my world tilted on its axis. There, emerging from the obstetrics and gynecology wing, was a ghost. Not just any ghost, Jasper Thorne. The man who had been the axis around which my university life had spun, and who had ultimately sent me flying into the void. 6 years. It had been 6 years since I'd last seen him. Back then he was the brilliant, brooding scholarship student, an unattainable figure whose quiet intensity was a magnet. He carried a pride so fierce it was almost a physical shield, and an ambition that shone through his worn-out genes. It was that stubborn, unbreakable will that had fascinated me most. I'd been the one to chase, to scheme, to relentlessly push my way into his life until he, seemingly against his own better judgment, let me in. And now here he was. Time had been kind to Jasper Thorne. The sharp angles of his face had softened into a more commanding handsomeness. He was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my first car, his posture radiating a confidence forged in struggle and solidified into power. But it wasn't him that held my gaze. It was the woman beside him, her smile radiant, her hand resting gently on the curve of her pregnant belly. And in Jasper's hand was a pale blue slip of paper, a prenatal checkup ticket. A cold dread, sharper than any winter wind, shot through me. I had to get out. No. Before he saw me. I turned to flee, but in my panic I stumbled directly into an elderly woman carrying a tote bag full of yarn. The collision was spectacular. Balls of yarn went rolling across the linoleum. "I'm so sorry," I babbled, my face flaming. The woman sighed, but seeing my distressed child and my obvious fluster, just waved a dismissive hand. "It's fine, dear." But the damage was done. The commotion had drawn attention. I could feel it, a specific focused attention that prickled the back of my neck. Slowly, dread weighing me down, I turned my head. His eyes were on me. Jasper Thorne was looking directly at me. Our gazes locked across the crowded hallway. For a single heart-stopping moment, the noise of the hospital faded. I searched his face for any flicker of recognition, any surprise. There was nothing. His expression was a perfectly composed mask of indifference, colder and more impenetrable than I ever remembered. It was the look you'd give a stranger who had caused a minor inconvenience. He held my gaze for a second longer, then turned, said something softly to his fiancée, and guided her away without a backward glance. The breath I didn't realize I'd been holding rushed out of me. He hadn't recognized me. Of course he hadn't. The Clara Evans he knew was gone. That girl wore cashmere and arrogance in equal measure, her waist-length hair a banner of her family's wealth. She would have scorned the discount mall clothes I now wore, my practical chin-length bob, and the tired shadows under my eyes. The tables had turned so completely it was almost laughable. Jasper was no longer the struggling student. The newspapers called him a tech visionary, a ruthless and rising star. The gap he once spoke of, the chasm between my world and his, had not only closed, it had reversed into a canyon I could never hope to cross. To say my heart wasn't breaking all over again would be a lie. The doctor's diagnosis was a small mercy, just a minor cold. A shot and a bag of medication later, we were free to go. Stepping out of the hospital, the night air was a brutal slap. The wind felt like it was slicing straight to the bone. I clutched Ben tighter with one arm and gripped the paper bag of medicine with the other, shivering as I tried to hail a cab. But at this hour, in this weather, it was a futile effort. I felt a profound, aching loneliness settle over me. Just as despair threatened to pull me under, a sleek black luxury car glided to a silent stop at the curb beside me. The passenger window descended, revealing the driver. Jasper Thorne. His face, starkly handsome under the streetlights, was impossible to look away from. My breath hitched. "Get in." His tone was flat, devoid of any warmth, and it sent a chill creeping up from the soles of my feet. I didn't move. I was frozen. He turned his head and a mocking smile curled one corner of his lips. "What? Do I need to come down and invite you? Or does being near me disgust you so much you won't even accept a ride?" The words were laced with barbs. Even after all this time, his words still had the power to sting. I looked down at Ben, his feverish cheek pressed against my coat. My pride was a luxury I could no longer afford. After a brief internal battle, I nodded stiffly. I opened the back door and slid into the opulent interior. I could feel his eyes on me in the rearview mirror. The pressure was immense. I had just settled in when his voice cut through the silence, cold and bland. "Clara Evans, do you really take me for a chauffeur?" My eyes snapped up, meeting his in the mirror. He glanced instinctively at the sleeping Ben in my arms, and after a long pause, a resigned tug pulled at the corner of his lips. He averted his gaze and started the car without another word. I felt I should say something. After a long moment, I could only manage a dry, quiet, "No." I spent the rest of the ride stiffly turned towards the window, watching the city lights blur past. This place had changed so much. The man in the driver's seat had changed even more. "Where to?" he asked, his voice clipped. I gave him the name of my apartment complex, a place far outside the city center where the rent was just barely within my meager budget. Jasper instantly furrowed his brows, looking utterly perplexed. "Clara Evans, is this the life you longed for?" he asked, his voice laced with a confusion that bordered on accusation. "Is this the reason you left me?" He rarely spoke so much. He must have been completely baffled. Why would the girl who had loved him so fiercely turn away without a backward glance? I had left to follow another man, and no matter how he had pleaded, it had been in vain. His hatred for me was justified. There was a lump in my throat, hard and painful. I could only manage a single choked syllable. Jasper seemed to feed on that non-answer. He didn't say another word. The car eventually slowed and stopped at the base of my drab apartment building. Clutching Ben made it difficult for me to open the door myself. As if reading my mind, Jasper got out. I watched through the window as he walked around the car and opened my door. "Give me the child," he said in a low voice. I pressed my lips together, but when I met his eyes, all my courage drained away. Wordlessly, carefully, he leaned in and took Ben from my arms. It was then that a strange thing happened. Ben, who had been restless and feverish in my arms, instinctively settled against his chest. In his sleep, he wrapped his small arms around Jasper's neck. A pang of something fierce and protective shot through me, and something else, something like awe at the silent language of blood ties. "I'm here," I said softly, getting out of the car. "Thank you for today. You should head back early." I instinctively reached to take Ben back, but Jasper shifted, dodging my hands. My arms closed on empty air. I looked up at him, confused. He simply turned and walked toward the building's entrance. "What? Afraid I'll cause trouble for him?" "He leaves you alone to take the child to see a doctor late at night." His voice carried a hint of fluctuation, a rare crack in his icy facade. He never wore his temper on his face. To strangers, Jasper Thorne was cold, but I knew a different man. I needed to silently apologize to my childhood friend Mark in my heart. Back then, to make the break clean and final, I had lied. I told Jasper I was leaving the country to be with Mark. Now I had to brazenly continue the lie. "He is busy. He doesn't know about this matter," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Jasper stopped in his tracks so abruptly I nearly crashed into his back. He turned to face me. "Why did you come back?" he asked, the question seeming to come from nowhere. I didn't know how to respond. I stood there frozen. But he didn't seem to expect an answer. Since he'd come all this way, I felt compelled to offer something. Clearing my throat, I said, "Let me hold him. Why don't you come up for a while? I'll pour you a glass of water." "I'm not busy," he interrupted. He made to hand Ben back to me, but the little boy clung tightly to Jasper's shirt collar. I was mortified. "Where should we put him?" Jasper asked. My throat felt dry. I pointed toward my apartment door. "In here." I led the way to my modest apartment. Jasper followed me in, his presence making the small living room seem even smaller. He looked around, his gaze taking in every detail, the second-hand furniture, the lack of personal effects. His expression was unreadable. He followed me into the tiny bedroom and carefully laid Ben down. I tucked him in. He was sleeping peacefully now. I glanced back at Jasper, who was standing in the doorway. I quietly followed him out. "Thank you again," I started, but the words died in my throat. He had undone the top button of his suit jacket and raised his arm, blocking my path in the narrow hallway. His eyes held a complex mix of emotions. Startled, I shrank back against the wall. Jasper leaned in closer, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. Where is he, Clara? I blinked, confused. What? There's nothing here belonging to a man, he stated, his gaze sweeping pointedly around the apartment. Where is he? Or are you lying to me? But I felt my heart skip a beat. This version of Jasper Thorne, intense, accusatory, barely containing his fury, was one I had never seen before. The carefully constructed walls I'd built around myself for 6 years felt like they were beginning to crack. His question hung in the air between us, sharp and accusatory. Where is he? Or are you lying to me? The intensity in his eyes was a physical force, pressing me against the wall of my own shabby apartment. This wasn't the cold, indifferent man from the hospital. This was something raw, something that had been simmering for 6 long years. I had to remind myself to breathe. The lie, the one I had crafted so carefully to make him let me go, was crumbling at the first sign of his scrutiny. My mind raced, scrambling for a foothold. He travels a lot for work, I stammered, my voice thin and reedy. I gestured vaguely. He doesn't keep much here. It's more convenient that way. It was a pathetic excuse. A man who lived here even part-time would leave a mark. A toothbrush, a jacket, a pair of shoes. My apartment was sterile, a temporary landing pad. Jasper didn't call me out directly. Instead, he let out a soft, derisive sound. He lowered his arm, but his presence still dominated the narrow hallway. He took a step back, giving me space to breathe but not to escape. I see, he said, the words dripping with skepticism. He turned and walked into my small living room, his gaze continuing its inventory of my life. Every worn cushion felt like an indictment. I followed him, feeling like a trespasser. Can I get you that water? I asked, desperate for normalcy. He didn't answer. He had stopped in front of a small bookshelf, his fingers brushing against the spine of a worn novel. Next to it was a small framed photograph. My heart seized. It was a picture of my mother and me, taken in our garden before everything fell apart. We looked happy. We looked wealthy. We looked like people Jasper used to know. His back was to me, but I saw his shoulders tense. He knew. He remembered. Why did you come back, Clara? He asked again, his voice quieter now, laced with a weariness. He wasn't asking about Mark anymore. He was asking about him. About the chasm between that photograph and this apartment. The lump was back in my throat. I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't tell him that my father was gone, that my mother had followed him 2 years later, her heart broken by exile and grief. I couldn't tell him that the only thing I had left was sleeping in the next room, and that we had returned to bury my mother's ashes in her homeland. I couldn't tell him that every day was a calculation between rent and groceries and the haunting fear that I wouldn't be enough for Ben. So I said the only thing I could. It was time to come home. He turned around and the look on his face was unreadable. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something closer to profound confusion. Just then a soft whimper came from the bedroom. Ben. Saved by my son. I fled into the bedroom. He was stirring. I sat on the edge of his bed, stroking his hair until he settled back into a deep sleep. When I emerged, Jasper was by the door, his hand on the knob. The moment had passed. I should go, he said, his voice flat. I just nodded. He opened the door but paused. He didn't look back. The child. Ben. Is he all right? The question was unexpected. Yes, I whispered. It's just a cold. He gave a curt nod. Good night, Clara. And then he was gone. The silence he left behind was overwhelming. I slid down the back of the door and finally let the tears fall. The encounter had shaken me. It dragged up memories I had worked to bury. I still remembered the first time I saw him. It wasn't grand. It was at the university library coffee shop. Jasper's parents had passed away young, leaving him to care for his younger sister, Lily. They were raised by their grandparents. So by high school, Jasper was already working multiple jobs to keep them afloat. Working at the coffee shop was just one of them. My roommates had buzzed about a brilliant and brooding computer science senior, but I'd brushed it off. I was Clara Evans from the Evans family. I had my pick of admirers from wealthy families, but I went with them, and I saw him, and that was it. He was different. He stood behind the counter, tall and intense, surrounded by chatter yet encased in a bubble of quiet focus. Completely indifferent to the giggles and glances. He was a mystery. A locked box I felt a desperate need to open. So I decided to pursue him. My roommates thought I was crazy. They said Jasper Thorne was like a fortress, beautiful to look at but impossible to breach. I loved a challenge. I found out his class schedule, his work schedule. I was shocked to discover he held down 5 different jobs while maintaining top grades. The guy was running himself into the ground. I started accidentally running into him. The biggest stroke of luck was discovering one of his jobs was at my father's company. I marched into my dad's office and got myself an intern title, placing me in the same department as Jasper. I saw him at the office and gave him my sunniest smile. Hi again. He looked right through me. The next day I brought breakfast for the whole team. I placed an extra coffee and a pastry on his desk. He didn't even glance at it. Take it away, he said, his voice emotionless. He was infuriating. But I was stubborn. Day after day I brought him breakfast. He never ate it, but he never threw it away. He'd just push it aside. It was a silent battle of wills. The breakthrough came on a rainy afternoon. Our project manager, a petty man, had it out for Jasper, threatened by his brilliance. He'd been piling meaningless work on him all day. I could see the tension in Jasper's shoulders. He still had to pick up Lily from school. I poked his shoulder. He turned, and for a split second, I saw the anxiety in his eyes before his mask slipped back. Smiling, I handed him my umbrella. If you have to go, go. I can finish this. I'll cover for you. He was silent, weighing his options. He hated owing people. How about this? I cover for you today and you owe me one. You can return the favor someday. He looked at me, then really looked at me. Oh, he agreed. Thank you. It was a small victory, a tiny crack in his fortress wall. After that he started talking to me. First in single-word answers, then in sentences. We began eating lunch together. Walking to class together. I knew the real key to Jasper wasn't Jasper himself. It was his sister, Lily. Love me, love my dog. I started finding ways to gently insert myself into their lives. Lily was in middle school, a sweet-looking girl with a gentle demeanor but fragile health. She had a congenital heart condition. It was a sword hanging over their heads, the reason Jasper worked himself to the bone. An accident happened. Lily collapsed during a PE class and was rushed to the hospital. I heard the news and ran. I found Jasper in the hallway outside the ICU. It was the first and only time I ever saw him break. He was clutching a doctor's sleeve, his voice ragged. I will get the money for the surgery, I promise. Please just help her find a donor. She's all I have left. Please. I stood frozen in the shadows, my heart shattering for him. The money was one thing. A compatible heart donor was a matter of fate. I couldn't let him do it alone. Using my family's foundation as a cover to maintain his pride, I anonymously paid Lily's medical bills. Jasper became a ghost after that, dividing his time between work, the hospital, and classes. I visited Lily often. One day the sweet girl looked at me. Clara, do you like my brother? I flushed but nodded. If it's you, she said, her smile fading, I'd be really happy. My brother is so lonely. If one day I can't bear the thought of him being alone. Don't talk like that, I said quickly. That's not going to happen. Unbeknownst to us, Jasper was outside the door. When he walked in a moment later, his head was down, but he had composed his face. Later, when he walked me out, he stopped. His voice was calm. It was you, wasn't it? Who paid the bills? I froze. How could he know? I was about to deny it when he added, I saw you at the billing office that day. I was caught. I stumbled over my words. I expected anger. Dad, he smiled. A small, genuine smile. I'm not an idiot, Clara. Thank you. I'll pay you back every cent. He looked so different when he smiled. Younger. The weight lightened for just a second. And in that second I fell even harder. The more I got to know him, the more I saw the man beneath the ice. He was inherently deeply good. Thoughtful in a way that was instinctive. Walking on the street, he'd place himself between me and the traffic. He'd pick bones out of fish before giving it to me. He'd stop in the rain to hold his umbrella over a shivering stray cat. I read a quote once, you should like someone who is inherently good, not just someone who is good to you. Jasper was that person. I felt his attitude towards me change. Maybe it was mixed with gratitude, but it was enough. The wall was coming down. The day we officially got together, it was pouring rain. Our terrible manager had forced the team out for a celebration dinner, which was really just another excuse to humiliate Jasper and take credit for his work. He forced drinks on everyone. Even with Jasper shielding me, I was dizzy. Then I saw it. The manager's hand moving to rest on top of Jasper's on the table. A possessive, slimy gesture. Something in me snapped. Disgusting. Fueled by a drunken courage, I stood up, swaying, and pulled Jasper behind me. I grabbed an empty bottle and slammed it on the table. "You old pervert. Keep your filthy hands to yourself." My words were slurred. Jasper caught me from behind. I turned to him. "Let's go. He's trash." We stumbled out into the rainy night. The moment the door closed, I expected anger. But in my haze, I saw him take out his phone and stop a recording. He'd had his own plan. He didn't need my reckless rescue. Did I mess things up?" I mumbled. He shifted, blocking the harsh light from my eyes. I shrank back. "Sorry." Instead of words, his answer was a kiss. Sudden, soft, and warm. It was over before I could process it. "What does that mean?" I finally whispered. He was silent for a long time. "Let's be together, Clara Evans." 6 words. They exploded in my heart. That was how, in a rain-soaked blur, Jasper Thorne became my boyfriend. Waking up the next morning with a pounding headache, I thought it was a dream. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Jasper. "Good morning. I'm downstairs." My heart started pounding. Our first official date. He was amazing. He remembered everything. But sometimes a nagging doubt crept in. Did he treat me so well out of genuine feeling or out of gratitude? He was still killing himself working, determined to pay back every penny. I couldn't bear to see him struggle. So I made a mistake. A huge, well-intentioned mistake. I reached out to my childhood friend Mark. Our families were close, but Mark and I were just friends. He was a playboy. Jasper was negotiating a brutal project with Mark's family's company. I'd seen Jasper come home exhausted night after night. I met Mark at a bar to ask him to give Jasper a break. The deal was made, but I came out reeking of alcohol, supported by a laughing Mark. And standing under a tree across the street, his face a thundercloud, was Jasper. He looked like the old Jasper, cold and distant. I pushed Mark away and stumbled toward him. Jasper didn't say a word. He just silently turned and carried me home on his back. "Are you jealous?" I mumbled into his neck. He didn't answer. Instead he asked, "Why did you go to see him?" I couldn't tell him the truth. His pride would never allow it. I fell asleep on his shoulder, the question hanging in the air. The next day he made me breakfast. He didn't ask about the night before. He just said, "That kind of place isn't safe. Don't go there again." I agreed, but I could feel a chill in him. Before I could figure out how to fix it, my world ended. My family went bankrupt. In a single day, everything was gone. The debts were astronomical. The scandal involved fatalities. My father had a heart attack and died on the operating table. My mother, shell-shocked, decided we had to flee the country. I was numb. The only thing I could think about was Jasper. He had just been accepted to a top graduate program. His future was brilliantly bright. And I had nothing. I was a liability. I would drag him down. We were impossible. The conclusion shattered my heart. That night I waited for him to come home. He came in smiling, a chill from the outside clinging to his suit. He opened his arms and hugged me, resting his head on my shoulder. "Were you tired today?" I asked, my voice hollow. He shook his head, his smile brightening. "I got paid today." He pulled a small box from his bag. "I saw this. It made me think of you." He opened it. Inside was a simple, beautiful platinum ring with a delicate silver bird in flight. My eyes stung. He often brought me little gifts. They were never extravagant, but they were always thoughtful. I took the ring and slipped it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. "It's beautiful," I said, my smile cracked. He frowned, his hand coming to touch my cheek. "What's wrong? You're so pale." Tears welled up. I shook my head frantically. I couldn't speak. I just leaned in and kissed him, pouring every bit of my love, my pain, and my despair into that one last kiss. One last time, I thought. Later, as he gently dried my hair, the words burned in my throat. The hairdryer was roaring. I whispered into the noise, "Let's break up." "What?" he asked, turning off the machine. I squeezed my eyes shut. I said, "Let's break up. I'm leaving with Mark." I used Mark. I told him we had grown up together, that we were the suitable match. I told him he had nothing and I wasn't willing to suffer with him. To make it final, I took the beautiful ring off my finger and threw it across the room. I will never forget the look on his face. The color drained from it. He was trembling. And I remember after he left, rushing downstairs and searching for hours in the gutter until I found the ring, caked in mud. I cleaned it, strung it on a chain and hid it under my clothes next to my heart. Secret. A reminder. A penance. Now 6 years later, standing in my shabby apartment, I could still feel its weight. And I knew Jasper Thorne was far from done with me. The confrontation tonight was only the beginning. The past had just crashed into my present, and it was demanding answers I could never give. The silence Jasper left behind was a physical thing, thick and heavy. I stayed on the floor, my back against the door, until the cold from the linoleum seeped through my jeans and the tears on my cheeks dried into tight, salty tracks. His question echoed in the emptiness. Where's he? Or are you lying to me? He knew. Maybe not the whole truth, but he knew the story I'd built around Mark was crumbling. The carefully constructed narrative I'd used to shield us both was failing under the weight of my shabby apartment and my obvious solitude. I pulled the chain from under my shirt, the cold platinum of the bird ring a familiar weight against my skin. I hadn't taken it off in 6 years. It was my secret shame, my hidden anchor. Running my thumb over its delicate wings, I finally pushed myself up. My life wasn't about Jasper Thorne anymore. It was about the little boy sleeping in the next room. I had a life to build for him, with or without Jasper's bewildering, disruptive presence. The next few days were a blur of routine. I got Ben settled into a local, affordable kindergarten. The search for a job was a sobering lesson in my new reality. My prestigious degree meant little without experience or connections, both of which had evaporated with my family's fortune. Finally, I landed a position as an administrative assistant at a small marketing firm. The title sounded decent, but the monthly salary was a pittance and the work was essentially fetching coffee and organizing files. It was humiliating, but it was a paycheck. The humiliation didn't stop at the office door. My new boss, a man named Mr. Davies who had once practically groveled at my father's parties, seemed to take perverse pleasure in my fall from grace. He assigned me the most tedious tasks and delighted in sending me to meetings with my former so-called friends. The first business dinner was a special kind of hell. It was at an upscale restaurant I used to frequent, filled with faces I recognized. Their smiles were now knives. Clara Evans. "My God, is that you?" sneered Jason Miller, whose family had made their fortune in plastics. "I heard about, well, everything. Tough break." "We were so sorry to hear about your parents," added Chloe Benton, her voice dripping with false sympathy as she eyed my off-the-rack dress. "It must be so different for you now." They were like vultures. The conversation was a minefield of backhanded compliments. The worst part was the drinking. To get the contract, Mr. Davies insisted I play the game. Glass after glass of wine was pushed into my hand. I drank. I smiled until my face ached. I endured their jabs because I needed this job. And then the killing blow. Jason Miller leaned back, a cruel smirk on his lips. "Oh, by the way, did you guys hear? Jasper Thorne is supposed to be stopping by later. He's a partner on this project now. Talk about a plot twist, huh? The scholarship kid and the bankrupt heiress. I guess he finally got his revenge." The blood drained from my face. Jasper. Here. Now, while I was like this, flushed from alcohol, being publicly mocked. I couldn't let him see me like this. "Excuse me," I mumbled, my voice thick. "I need to use the restroom." I stood up, the world swaying. I had to get out. "Where do you think you're going?" Mr. Davies's hand clamped down on my wrist. "We're not done here. Sit down." "I really need a moment," I pleaded. Chloe laughed, a tinkling, nasty sound. "What's the matter, Clara? Not used to the cheap stuff." The words were a slap. I felt dizzy, nauseous. I lowered my head, overwhelmed by a wave of despair. And then a shift in the air. A sudden silence fell over our table. The grip on my wrist loosened. I felt a presence step in front of me, a tall, solid form that blocked me from the view of the others. The scent hit me first. Clean, familiar, with a faint note of pine. It was a scent I'd know anywhere. My nerves, stretched taut, instinctively relaxed. Jasper didn't say a word to the table. His presence alone was a command. I felt his arm go around my shoulders, his touch firm, guiding me away from the stunned silence. He didn't lead me to the restroom. He led me straight out of the restaurant and into the cool night air. I was too humiliated to protest. He guided me to his car and opened the passenger door. "Get in," he said, his voice low. I slid into the leather seat. He leaned across me, his shoulder brushing against mine, and pulled the seatbelt across my body. The gesture was so familiar, so achingly reminiscent of 1,000 car rides in a different life, that it brought a fresh wave of tears to my eyes. He'd always done that. Always. He got into the driver's seat and started the car. The silence was heavy. "Won't your fiancé be angry?" The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. They were petty and stupid. Jasper's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What?" I raised my head, the alcohol loosening my tongue. "Jasper, after all this time you've learned nothing good. Since you already have a fiancé, why bother with me? You helped me today, but what about next time? You should be like them. You should be cursing me, belittling me, hating me. It would be easier." I didn't hear his response. I closed my eyes, weary to my bones. The car stopped. I didn't need to look to know we were outside my apartment. Jasper got out, came to my side, and opened the door. When I didn't move, he simply leaned in and lifted me into his arms. "I can walk," I protested weakly, but my arms encircled his neck. He smelled so good. It was a dangerous thought. He carried me upstairs and shouldered my apartment door open. He set me down gently on the sofa. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. "Where's the child?" he asked. "Asleep," I murmured. "The nanny leaves after he's in bed." It was a luxury I could barely afford. Jasper was silent. He moved to the kitchen, found a glass, and poured me water. He then pulled a small packet of hangover medicine from his pocket and handed it to me. The simple kindness undid me. But I couldn't accept it. I found my voice sharp and defensive. "You should leave. Next time, don't meddle." I don't know which word struck the nerve. But something in him snapped. He moved fast. 2 steps forward and he was on me, his hand closing around my wrist. His grip wasn't cruel, but it was unbreakable. "Clara Evans," he bit out, each word squeezed from between clenched teeth, his face inches from mine. His eyes were burning with a fury I had never seen. "Is that how a human being speaks?" He was shaking. "It was you who provoked me first. It was you who came after me. It was you who made me." He stopped himself. Before I could respond, his mouth crashed down on mine. It wasn't a kiss. It was a punishment. A conquest. It was fierce and hungry and filled with 6 years of pent-up anger and betrayal. I tasted blood. I tried to push against his chest, but his arms were like steel bands. He was everywhere. He backed me toward the sofa. This wasn't the Jasper I knew. This was a man possessed. "Let go of my mom." The small, furious voice cut through the haze. Jasper froze. The tension snapped. I turned my head. Ben was standing in the hallway, his little face pale and terrified. He ran forward and started hitting Jasper's leg. "You bad man. Let go of my mommy." The spell was broken. Horror washed over me. I shoved against Jasper's chest and he moved, stumbling back. I scrambled off the sofa and scooped Ben into my arms. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's okay. Uncle was just joking." It was a scary game. I really did not want Ben to meet Jasper. Genetics are a terrifying thing. His eyes, a striking hazel green, were exactly like Jasper's. Jasper ran a hand over his face. He knelt down. "Ben, I scared you. That was my fault. I'm very sorry." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of candy. It was the specific brand of peppermint I'd always loved. He still carried them. Ben, soothed by the candy and his apology, slowly stopped crying. The exhaustion took over and he soon fell asleep in my arms again. The 2 of us stood in the wreckage. "I didn't," Jasper began, his voice rough. "The engagement. It's fake. Just a contract." The statement was abrupt. I just stared. "Lena," he said. "She has someone she loves. We did it for mutual convenience." He was explaining himself to me. My mind struggled. A contract? Fake? I didn't know how I eventually got to bed that night. When I woke up, I was alone. But that wasn't the end. For the next week, I would see him. His car would be idling outside my building. He'd wordlessly load us in, drive us, and pick us up. He started bringing things. Toys for Ben, food from restaurants he knew I used to like. It was bewildering. If I were really with Mark, what Jasper was doing would be textbook interference. I didn't want his pity. But my resistance was weak. The weather turned foul. One morning, seeing us shivering at the bus stop, Jasper simply pulled over and bundled a delighted Ben into the car. He gave me a look that brooked no argument. It was infuriating. It was familiar. We were in the car waiting at a red light, the rain drumming on the roof. Ben was chattering happily. Jasper's voice cut through. "Did you divorce him?" "Mark." I thought I'd misheard. "What?" "Don't try to brush me off. Did he kick you out with nothing?" He shook his head. "I really appreciate his imagination is truly excessive." I almost laughed. The irony was suffocating. But it was easier to let him believe that. I just shrugged. He was silent for another block. Then he spoke again, and his words were so shocking I thought the rain had short-circuited my brain. "Clara Evans," he said, utterly serious. "Please consider me." I choked. "What do you mean?" "I'm saying consider me." The light turned green. He drove forward. "Back then, I agreed to that fake engagement because there was too much gossip. I found it troublesome. Since marrying anyone is still marriage." He paused. "Clara, marry me." My world screeched to a halt. What? At least the child would have security. In others' eyes, he wouldn't be from a single-parent family. I stared, dumbfounded. He was Jasper Thorne, successful, wealthy, undeniably handsome. And he was proposing to me, a woman he believed was a destitute, discarded single mother. "Are you okay?" I sputtered. "Have you lost it?" He took a deep breath. "You know I never joke." That was true. Jasper Thorne did not joke. "I've asked for leave for you today. If you agree, we can go home now to get our documents and get married." His voice was matter-of-fact. I was speechless. He didn't seem to need my answer. The car drove back to my apartment. "Will you go up and get it yourself?" he asked. "Or should I come with you?" I took a deep breath. "Jasper, do you even realize what you're saying?" "I told you. I know exactly what I'm saying. So, do you want me to come with you?" I fell silent. There were 1,000 reasons this was insane. It was he who broke the silence. "Have you really forgotten me, Clara?" he asked. Then he reached out, his fingers hovering near the base of my throat, where the chain lay hidden. "If you've forgotten me, why are you still wearing the ring I gave you? Didn't you throw it away?" I froze. My hand flew to my chest. He knew. That night, during that kiss, he must have felt it. I wanted to disappear. "I have a child," I whispered, my last shield. "I know. We can raise him together. If you're afraid I won't treat him well, we don't have to have any of our own. Just Ben is enough." The sincerity undid me. A sob caught in my throat. "Even if," I began, my voice choked. "Even if this child isn't yours?" Jasper's gaze didn't waver. It was a simple sound. An acceptance. A promise. That sound broke me. The tears came. 6 years of loneliness poured out. Without another word, I got out of the car. I walked upstairs. I went to the small lockbox. My household register was still new. Now it was going to get a new stamp. I came back down. Jasper was waiting, holding his own document. Why did he have it? Had he been planning this? My mind was a mess. It wasn't until we were in the civil registry office and the clerk was stamping the 2 booklets that I woke from the dream. I was holding a marriage certificate. To Jasper Thorne. He was looking down at my document, a furrow in his brow. He pointed. "Why does it say, unmarried here?" I was dazed. "Huh. Why does your status say, unmarried?" Then the implication hit him. His face darkened. "That Mark. He had a child with you out of wedlock? He didn't give you the status you deserve." I stared, utterly speechless. When you care too much, you lose all judgment. Jasper Thorne's legendary IQ had vanished. He was so busy being furious at a man who didn't exist he couldn't see the truth. "Do you regret it?" I asked suddenly. He gave me a faint glance, a genuine smile touching his lips. "No regrets." Holding the booklet, my heart felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. I smiled back. But it was short-lived. My phone buzzed. It was the kindergarten. My stomach dropped. I answered. Ben had gotten into a fight. I needed to come. Jasper heard enough. His expression shifted to protective ferocity. "Let's go." We arrived to a scene of minor chaos. Ben was sitting curled in a chair, silent and stoic, with a scratch on his cheek. Another boy was wailing. The moment Ben saw me, his brave facade crumbled. He ran to me, sobbing. "They said, They said I don't have a dad. They said I'm twisted. Mommy, it's not true, is it? My heart shattered. Ben is the most well-behaved child. Don't listen to them. I looked at Jasper. You have a dad. I pulled him forward. Look, baby. This is your dad. Jasper's conversation with the principal was not going well. I heard snippets. Poor environment. Subjecting my child to injustice. He was claiming Ben with a ferocity that took my breath away. Watching him, hearing him say my child, with such easy possession, I felt a dizzying surge of hope and fear. Meanwhile, Ben, calmer now, hugged my neck. Mommy, who is this strange uncle from that night? The scary one. Took me a moment. That's your daddy, sweetheart. Really? He asked. It was astonishing. Jasper was so focused on his fury at the school and his rage against Mark, he hadn't yet noticed the most obvious thing. Ben's eyes were a perfect copy of his. Her stubborn frown was his. It wasn't until days later, during a conversation with his fake fiancée Lena, that the penny dropped. We ran into her. She was with a strikingly beautiful woman. As we were leaving, she looked between Jasper and Ben. I have to say, she said offhandedly, you two really do look like father and son. It's uncanny. She said it and moved on. I saw Jasper freeze. I saw his head turn, his eyes narrowing as he really truly looked at Ben for the first time. The car ride home was silent. The rain had started. Ben was asleep. Clara, he said, his voice strained. He was silent for a long moment. So, Ben is my child. The question was tentative, full of a hope he didn't dare feel. I couldn't help a soft laugh. Don't laugh. Be serious. Ben is my child. Really? I nodded. He is yours. I added gently, Jasper, if you just calculate the timing and look at him, you'd know. He fell into a deep silence. I thought he was processing the math. But after a long while I heard him whisper so softly I almost missed it. I didn't dare to hope. Those 5 words shattered me. They laid bare the depth of his hurt. He had thought Ben was another man's child, and yet he had married me anyway. He had offered to raise him as his own. I placed my hand on his thigh. Think boldly. So you've never been with Mark? Not once. Hearing my confirmation, Jasper fell completely silent. I realized belatedly he wasn't driving us home. Where are we going? You'll see, he said, his voice thick. The car slowed into a neighborhood I knew better than any other. My heart pounded. We were where I grew up. He pulled into a long driveway and stopped. It was the old house. The Evans family home. My home. Tears blurred my vision. I couldn't speak. Jasper turned off the engine. I bought it, he said simply, his voice rough. He pressed something cold into my hand. A key. This will be our home now. Welcome home, Clara. I looked at the key, then at the beautiful house. The dam broke. I clutched the keys and sobbed, great heaving sobs that held 6 years of grief. Jasper simply held me. When my tears subsided, he got out and carefully unbuckled a sleeping Ben. He cradled him, then opened my door. He leaned in. Let's go home. And for the first time in 6 years I believed that I finally had one. The key felt like a brand in my palm, heavy with the weight of a past I thought I'd lost forever. Jasper stood beside me, Ben asleep in his arms, a silent sentinel before the fortress of my childhood. He didn't rush me. He just waited, allowing the ghosts of laughter and loss to swirl around us in the cold night air. You've bought it. The words were a choked whisper. The financial and emotional magnitude of such an act was staggering. This house was a monument to everything we'd lost. And he had just reclaimed it. It's just a house, Clara, he said softly, but his eyes said he knew it was a cathedral of memory. It needed to come home. You needed to come home. Home. The word was a foreign currency I no longer knew how to spend. Home had been a series of rented rooms where the only constant was fear. This was a different reality altogether. With trembling fingers I fitted the key into the lock. The mechanism turned with a smooth, familiar click. I pushed the heavy oak door open. The air that rushed out wasn't musty. It smelled of lemon polish and fresh flowers. I stepped inside, my breath catching. It was exactly the same. And yet completely different. The grand staircase, the soaring ceilings, they were all there, pristine. But it wasn't a museum. It was lived in. Warm. The furniture was a blend of the classic pieces I remembered and new, comfortable sofas. My mother's favorite vase sat on the entryway table filled with fresh white lilies. Her piano stood polished and open. It was as if the soul of the house had been preserved, but the shadow of our ruin had been meticulously scrubbed away. How? Was all I could manage. I had help, Jasper said simply, carrying Ben upstairs towards my old bedroom. I followed him in a daze. He laid him down in the center of the large canopy bed I'd slept in as a girl. Ben sighed in his sleep, snuggling into the down comforter. We stood side by side, watching him sleep in a room from a past he'd never known. Lena, Jasper said finally. Her taste is impeccable. And she understood the assignment. The assignment? To make it yours again. Not a replica. A restoration. Tears welled up again, but of a bewildering gratitude. He hadn't just bought a house. He had undertaken an archaeological dig into my life and rebuilt it with a painstaking care I couldn't fathom. The next few days were a surreal blur. Ben was ecstatic, running through the halls, exploring the garden, declaring it a castle. For him it was a magical adventure. For me it was like walking through a dream. Jasper moved in with a quiet efficiency. His suits appeared in the closet next to my meager wardrobe. His toiletries lined the bathroom counter. He was there at breakfast, reading the Financial Times while Ben chattered. He was there at dinner, asking about his day. He was playing house. And the terrifying part was how easily I slipped into the role. The legal marriage was one thing. This domesticity was another. It was a potent drug. Every time he casually referred to Ben as our son, every time his hand brushed mine, a little more of my resolve crumbled. But the lie of Mark hung between us like a specter. Jasper's hatred for this phantom was a living thing. He would make offhand comments about that bastard abandoning us, his jaw tight with a fury that was both touching and horrifyingly misplaced. He was building a new reality on the foundation of a fiction, and the guilt began to eat me alive. I tried to focus on the practicalities. I quit my horrible job. There was no need for it now, a fact that both relieved and shamed me. My hard-won independence had been erased. I was back to being Clara Evans of the Evans mansion, but now I was a kept woman. The thought rankled. Jasper, however, had other ideas. "You're not sitting around here arranging flowers," he announced one morning. He slid a business card across the table. It was for the family foundation. My family's foundation, the one I'd used to pay for Lily's medical bills. "It's yours," he said. "I just held it for you. It's time you took it back. The board meets on Thursday. I'll drive you." I stared at the card, my father's name next to mine. It was another piece of my past handed back. But I felt like a fraud. The foundation dealt with large-scale charity. What did I know about that? I'd been counting pennies for milk. The board meeting was another exercise in surrealism. The old, stern-faced directors who had once answered to my father now looked at me with pity and curiosity. Jasper sat beside me, a silent pillar of support, but he never spoke. He let me flounder through the reports, let me ask naive questions. Afterwards in the car he was quiet. "They think I'm an idiot," I said. "They think you're inexperienced," he corrected. "There's a difference. You'll learn. You're an Evans. It's in your blood." He said it with such conviction I almost believed him. The days formed a new pattern. Mornings with Ben and Jasper. Days at the foundation. Evenings as a family. It was a life of breathtaking privilege. But the better it got, the more I felt the walls of my gilded cage closing in. Jasper's care was all-encompassing. A driver appeared. A personal chef. A new wardrobe of expensive clothes. He was erasing every trace of my struggle. He was trying to give me back my old life. But I wasn't that girl anymore. The girl who had smashed a bottle to defend him had been forged in loss. He wanted to pretend that fire had never been necessary. The tension came to a head at a charity gala, my first public appearance as head of the foundation. I wore a stunning emerald gown Jasper had chosen. I looked the part. I smiled, I shook hands. Jasper was at my side, the perfect doting husband. I saw the looks. The whispers. "Is that Clara Evans? I heard she's back. And with Jasper Thorne. Talk about a twist. Do you think he did it for her money? Don't be daft, she's broke. He's worth 10 times her family ever was." Their words didn't hurt. Jasper's performance did. He was playing a role and he was so good at it. He belonged in this world. I felt like an imposter. On the drive home I was silent. "You did well tonight," he said. Did I? My voice was flat. I felt like a prop. The returned heiress on the arm of her wealthy savior. It's a great story. He glanced at me. What are you talking about? This, Jasper. I gestured between us. All of this. The house, the job, the clothes. You're trying to fix me. To put me back in my box. But the box is broken. I'm broken. You can't just buy a new life and pretend the old one didn't happen. He was silent. Is that what you think I'm doing? What else? You swoop in, you solve everything with money, you marry me out of obligation or nostalgia, and you expect me to be Clara Evans' society darling? The last 6 years happened. I struggled. I failed. I learned to survive. You can't erase that. My words hung sharp and angry. I expected cold dismissal. Instead, he pulled the car over and turned to me. The city lights played across his tired face. You think this is about obligation? He asked, his voice low and intense. You think I did this because I felt sorry for you? Wanted a trophy wife? Isn't it? No, Clara, he said, the raw honesty stealing my breath. It's not. I did it because for 6 years I lived in a world without you. And it was empty. A series of transactions. Get the degree. Build the company. Make the money. Backlist. And when I checked the last box, I looked around and the house was empty, and the car was quiet, and there was no one to bring a stupid ring to because I saw it and it made me think of them. He looked away, his throat working. I bought the house because every time I drove past, it felt like a piece of you was trapped inside. I gave you the foundation back because it's yours. It's who you are. It's not about erasing the last 6 years. It's about giving you the tools to build on them. He turned back, his eyes blazing. I don't want the girl you were. That girl infuriated me. She was reckless and stubborn. A ghost of a smile. I want the woman you became. The one strong enough to survive. The mother. The one who is still stubborn and looks at me like I'm the biggest idiot on the planet. He reached out, brushing a stray tear from my cheek. I'm not trying to fix you, Clara. I'm trying to build a future with you. The past happened. It hurt. It changed us. But we're here now. Together. I was speechless. The walls around my heart shuddered. He saw me. Not the pathetic creature he'd rescued, not the ghost of an heiress, but me. The me forged in the fire. He wasn't trying to put me in a cage. He was trying to give me a foundation. I didn't know what to say. The fight drained out of me. He started the car. The rest of the drive was silent, but the air had shifted. Charged. Vulnerable. When we got home, he didn't come upstairs. He went to his study. I went to check on Ben, then wandered through the silent house. It felt different. Not a museum. The potential. I found myself at his study door. He was at his desk, staring blindly at his screen. Jasper, I said softly. He looked up. Thank you, I said. It was inadequate. He nodded. Go to bed, Claire. You're tired. I turned to go. The narrative, he said, stopping me. It's not about a savior. It's about a second chance. For both of us. I held his gaze, a real understanding passing between us for the first time. I nodded. I went to bed but couldn't sleep. His words played over in my mind. I heard him come upstairs much later. He slipped into bed, careful not to touch me. We lay there in the dark, side by side, two people bound by a past of love and pain, a legal document, a child, and a fragile new beginning. The lie of Mark was still there, a poison pill. But for the first time I felt a flicker of hope that maybe we could build something real on the ruins. The fragile truce we'd forged in the car that night didn't magically fix everything. It was more like a ceasefire in a cold war. Jasper stopped sleeping in the guest room, but a new, careful distance remained between us in our shared bed. The house was filled with the sounds of a family, Ben's laughter, the chef preparing meals, the cleaner polishing the floors, but the silence between Jasper and me was its own distinct presence. He was trying. I could see that. He'd ask about my day at the foundation, his questions sharp and insightful, genuinely helping me navigate the complexities I'd been thrown into. He was a patient, devoted father to Ben, his love for the boy an undeniable, solid fact that warmed the coldest corners of the house. But the shadow of the lie still lingered. His kindness felt like it was extended to a version of me he was still constructing. The capable foundation director, the good mother, the wife he'd chosen out of a sense of duty and a faded memory of love. He wasn't seeing the woman who had lied, who had been broken, who was terrified of this second chance she didn't feel she deserved. The foundation became my refuge, my penance. I launched a new initiative aimed at providing financial aid and support to families facing catastrophic medical debt. I worked late, pouring every ounce of my energy into it as if by helping these strangers, I could atone for the fact that a hidden bank account had spared me that particular hell while I'd let Jasper believe we'd lost everything. One afternoon I was buried in grant proposals when my phone buzzed. It was the head of Ben's new exclusive kindergarten. Mrs. Thorne? There's been a bit of an incident. My heart leaped into my throat. Is Ben okay? He's fine, the woman said quickly. It's just, there was an altercation with another child. We've tried calling Mr. Thorne but he's not answering. We need a parent to come down. An altercation. The word from the first, shabby kindergarten echoed in my head. They said I don't have a dad. I'm on my way, I said, my hand already shaking as I grabbed my purse. I tried Jasper's phone. Straight to voicemail. A spike of anger pierced through my anxiety. He couldn't shut Ben out. He couldn't. I arrived at the school to a scene of déjà vu. Ben was sitting in the principal's office, his small arms crossed, his face a perfect mimicry of Jasper's most unreadable expression. A little boy was sniffling across the room, nursing a red mark on his hand. What happened? I asked, kneeling in front of my son. He glared at the other boy, his lower lip jutting out. He said Daddy isn't my real daddy. He said my real daddy didn't want me. So I bit him. The words were a physical blow. My lies had teeth and they were biting my son. Before I could respond, the office door flew open. Jasper stood there, his hair disheveled, his tie loose, his chest heaving as if he'd sprinted across the city. He must have gotten the message. His eyes scanned the room, instantly finding Ben. The careful, controlled mask he'd worn for weeks vanished. In its place was pure, unvarnished paternal fear. Ben, he said, his voice rough. Are you all right? Ben's brave facade crumbled. He launched himself out of the chair and into Jasper's arms. Daddy. He said you weren't my real daddy. Jasper caught him, holding him tight. He looked over Ben's head at the principal, his expression turning dangerously calm. Is that true? The principal flustered. Well, children will say things, Mr. Thorne. We've spoken to both. What? Exactly. Did he say? Jasper's voice was quiet, but it held the force of a command. The principal stammered. He said he overheard his parents talking about how Mrs. Thorne had only recently returned to the city with Ben, and that you had married her after the fact. Jasper's gaze cut to me, and in that moment I saw the full, devastating impact of my deception. It wasn't confined to the space between us. It was in the gossip of strangers, in the taunts of children, in the tears of our son. My attempt to protect him had made him a target. He looked back at the principal. I see. He shifted Ben to one hip. He walked over to the little boy who shrank back. Jasper didn't crouch down to his level. He looked the boy directly in the eye, his voice firm but not unkind. My name is Jasper Thorne. I am Ben's father. His real father. The only father he has ever had or will ever need. Is that understood? The boy, terrified, nodded vigorously. Jasper then turned his gaze to the boy's mother, who had just arrived, looking mortified. And I suggest you have a conversation in your home about the dangers of gossiping about my family. The woman nodded, mute. He looked at the principal. This is the second time my son has been subjected to this. There will not be a third. With that he turned, still holding a now calm Ben, and walked out. I hurried after him. He didn't say a word on the drive home. He held Ben on his lap, stroking his hair. Ben, emotionally spent, fell asleep, his thumb in his mouth, a habit he'd given up years ago. When we got home, Jasper carried Ben upstairs. I heard the bath running, the low murmur of his voice as he read a story. I waited in the hallway, my heart a bruised, aching thing. However angry he was at me, his love for Ben was absolute. He came out of Ben's room much later, closing the door softly. He leaned against the wall, looking exhausted down to his soul. We stood there in the dim light, the silence between us different now. The cold anger was gone, replaced by a shared, profound weariness. I'm sorry, I said. It was all I had. I know, he sighed. He looked at me, and for the first time in weeks he really looked at me. Not at the liar, not at the project, but at me. I've been trying to process it. And? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. And I don't know, he admitted, the honesty stark and painful. The anger, it's easier. The hurt, that's harder. He pushed off from the wall. I can't just flip a switch, Clara. I can't just forget the last 6 years of believing one reality and suddenly accept another. I'm not asking you to forget, I said. I'm just asking you to try to understand. I am trying, he said, a flash of frustration returning. God, Claire, I am. But every time I start to, I remember the look on your face when you threw that ring. I remember the things you said. I remember the emptiness. And now I have to reconcile that with the idea that it was all a performance? A sacrifice. He shook his head. It's too much. He started to walk toward his study, then stopped. He didn't turn around. I don't want to lose what we have now, he said, his voice low. With Ben. With this. He gestured vaguely at the house. But I don't know how to get from where we were to where we are without going back through all that pain. And I'm not sure I can survive it a second time. He disappeared into the study, closing the door. I stood alone, his words hanging in the air. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reconciliation. But it was something. It was an acknowledgement of the battlefield between us. He wasn't shutting me out anymore. He was just lost. And for the first time since he'd walked out, I felt a flicker of hope. Because if he was lost, it meant he was still trying to find his way back to me. The path ahead was uncharted and fraught with pain. But we were both still on the map. And that for now had to be enough. The war wasn't over, but the Cold War had thawed into a painful, honest stalemate. The stalemate held for a week. A week of tense civility, of conversations that revolved solely around Ben and the Foundation, of a bed that felt a mile wide. Jasper was trying. I could see the effort in the set of his shoulders, in the way he'd force himself to ask about my day. But the warmth, the easy intimacy we'd started to rebuild, was gone, replaced by a careful, brittle politeness. I threw myself deeper into the medical debt initiative, naming it the Lily Project, in a private tribute to the sister he'd fought so hard for. It was my secret offering, my silent apology woven into the dry language of grant proposals and funding applications. I was in the Foundation's archives one afternoon, looking for old financial models when I found it. It was a small, unmarked box tucked behind a row of tax records. Inside wasn't Foundation business. It was my business. My past. Diaries from my teenage years. A bundle of letters from my grandmother and a large, stiff envelope. My name was written on the front in my father's familiar, looping script. A cold dread trickled down my spine. I hadn't seen this box before. The lawyers who'd handled the bankruptcy must have separated it from the main assets and stored it here, forgotten. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single, thick document. The title made my blood run cold. Last Will and Testament of Alistair Evans. This wasn't the will that had been executed. That will had been a document of despair, written in the shadow of the scandal, leaving nothing but debt and apologies. This was different. It was dated years earlier, before everything had gone wrong. I skimmed the legalese, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was standard stuff, leaving the bulk of the estate to my mother and me. But then my eyes caught on a codicil, a later edition attached to the end. And to my daughter Clara, upon her 25th birthday or upon the occasion of her marriage, whichever comes first, I bequeath the entirety of my controlling shares in Evans Holdings, to be held in trust by the Foundation until such time. The paper slipped from my numb fingers, fluttering to the floor. Evans Holdings, the parent company, the one that had been bled dry and left for dead, the one whose collapse had triggered everything. But controlling shares. Even a shell of a company, if it still held patents, property, anything, those shares could be worth something. They could be worth everything. The separate bank account had been a tragedy of errors. This was something else. This was a thread that, if pulled, could unravel the entire narrative of my life for the past 6 years. If there had been assets, a company to salvage, then my sacrifice, my lies, my heartbreak, all of it had been for nothing. It was an even more profound and devastating mistake. I stuffed the will back into the envelope and the envelope back into the box, shoving it deep into the back of the cabinet. I couldn't deal with this. Not now. Not when the fragile peace with Jasper was so precarious. The secret was too big. It would destroy us. That evening, Jasper was late for dinner. Ben was already in bed when I heard his key in the door. I was in the living room, pretending to read, my mind still reeling from the afternoon's discovery. He walked in looking more tired than I'd seen him in weeks. He didn't go to his study. Instead, he came and sat in the armchair opposite me, loosening his tie. "We need to talk," he said, his voice gravelly. My heart stuttered. Had he found out? Had someone at the foundation seen me with the box? About what? "About this," he said, gesturing between us. "This limbo. I can't do it, Claire. I can't live in this house with you and pretend I'm not," he trailed off, running a hand over his face. "I spent 6 years thinking you chose someone else. Now I find out you chose some twisted, self-sacrificing ideal over me. Over us. I look at you and I don't know whether to be furious or what," I whispered. "Or amazed," he said, the words sounding torn from him. "That you could love me enough to do something that stupid. That you could hurt me that much because you thought it was for my own good." Tears filled my eyes. "I was trying to protect you." "I don't need your protection," he said, his voice rising slightly before he checked himself. "I needed you, Clara. I needed you to trust me. To fight with me, not for me." The truth of his words was a lance through my heart. I had been so proud, so certain that my way was the only way. The arrogance he'd accused me of was real. "I know that now," I said, my voice thick. "I was wrong. So terribly wrong." He was silent for a long moment, just looking at me. The anger seemed to drain out of him, leaving behind a deep, weary sadness. "The problem is," he said slowly, "I think I understand why you did it. And that's almost worse. Because I can't just hate you for it." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark garden. "I loved you so much it terrified me. You were this force of nature. Rich, beautiful, relentless. You blew into my life and turned everything upside down. And part of me was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to realize you could do better. For you to leave." I stared at his back, stunned. I'd never known he felt that way. I'd been so busy feeling insecure about his brilliance, his independence, that I never saw his own vulnerabilities. "So when you did," he continued, his voice quiet, "it just confirmed my deepest fear. That I wasn't enough. That I never could be. For 6 years that's what I lived with. And now I have to rebuild everything on the idea that you left because you loved me. It's a lot to ask a man to believe." I got up and walked to him, stopping a few feet away. I didn't dare touch him. "You don't have to believe it all at once," I said. "But can we just try? Can we start from here? Not from who we were, but from who we are now. A man who built an empire from nothing. A woman who learned how to survive it. Parents to an amazing little boy." He turned to look at me, his eyes searching mine in the dim light. The hardness was gone, replaced by a profound exhaustion and a flicker of something that might have been hope. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. He ignored it. It buzzed again, insistently. With a sigh, he walked over and picked it up. His expression changed as he read the screen. It became closed off, professional. "I have to take this," he said, already moving toward his study. "It's about the Singapore merger." He closed the study door behind him. The moment was broken. I stood alone in the living room, the echo of our almost reconciliation hanging in the air, mixed with the chilling fear of the will I'd discovered. The past wasn't done with us yet. It was waiting in a cardboard box, ready to tear us apart all over again. The next morning, the tension had eased slightly. Jasper had made coffee. He'd even asked about my schedule for the day. It was a tentative, fragile step forward. We were having a civil breakfast when Ben padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, champ," Jasper said, his voice softer than it had been in days. Ben climbed onto a chair. "Daddy, are you and Mommy not mad anymore?" Jasper and I exchanged a glance over his head. The simplicity of the question was devastating. "We're working on it, buddy," Jasper said, ruffling his hair. "Good," Ben said seriously. "Because when you're mad, the house feels icky." Out of the mouths of babes. The house had felt icky. It had felt like a beautiful, empty shell. Later that day, I was at the foundation, my door closed, staring at the cabinet where I'd hidden the box. I knew I had to look into it. I had to know what, if anything, those shares were worth. Ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. I was about to call my lawyer when my office phone rang. It was Sarah, Jasper's assistant. "Mrs. Thorne? I'm sorry to bother you, but Mr. Thorne asked me to send over the due diligence files for the Vance Tech merger with Singapore Global. He said you had the Evans Holdings archival records there that might have some pertinent patent histories. I froze. Evans Holdings. The name was a knife to my heart. I'm not sure, I stammered. I'd have to look. Of course, Sarah said pleasantly. He said the files would likely be in the older archive boxes in the back storage room. Could you have a look? He needs them for a call at 4. The back storage room. Where I'd found the box. My blood ran cold. It was a coincidence. It had to be. Jasper couldn't know. I'll look, I managed to say before hanging up. I walked to the storage room on legs that felt like lead. This was it. I had to open the box now in case the will was sitting right on top. I couldn't let anyone else find it. I retrieved the box and carried it back to my office, locking the door behind me. With a deep breath, I lifted the lid. The will was right where I'd left it. I set it aside and began pulling out other files, looking for the patent histories Jasper needed. There were old annual reports, technical schematics, and then, at the very bottom, another, smaller envelope. This one was addressed to me in my father's handwriting, but it was newer. The ink wasn't faded. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely tear it open. Inside was a letter. Not a legal document. A personal one. My dearest Clara. If you're reading this, then things have gone more wrong than I ever feared they could. By now, you likely know about the troubles at the company. I've made mistakes, taken risks I shouldn't have. I may not be the man you thought I was. But I need you to know something. The company is not all there is. The shares I left you are your lifeline. They are tied to a subsidiary, Evum Innovations. It's a shell company on paper, but it holds the patents for the new composite material we were developing. The material Jasper Thorne was working on. My breath caught. Jasper? My father knew about Jasper? The project at my company was just a front. The real work, the genius, was his. I saw it. I knew it was revolutionary. I transferred the patents to Evum to protect them from the company's creditors. They're clean, Claire. They are yours. They are worth a fortune. I know about you and Jasper. I saw the way you looked at him. He's a good man from what I can tell. A brilliant one. Too proud for his own good like someone else I know. Things have gone badly, use this. Build a life. With him or without him. But know that I always believed in you and I am so sorry. Love, Dad. The letter slipped from my fingers. I sat there in my expensive office in my beautiful life that Jasper had bought back for me, and I felt the world drop out from under me. The patents. The revolutionary project Jasper had been slaving over, the one our terrible manager had taken credit for. My father had stolen them. He'd hidden them away from me like a squirrel hiding a nut for winter. Jasper's entire fortune, his life's work, was built on technology that belonged to me. Technology my father had essentially stolen from him and gifted to me as a parting present. The lie I had told was nothing compared to this. This was a betrayal so deep, so fundamental I couldn't even comprehend it. And Jasper needed these files for his merger. He was about to go into a multi-million-dollar deal, and the entire foundation of his technology was built on sand. I heard a knock on my office door. Clara? It's Sarah. Did you have a chance to find those files for Mr. Thorne? I looked at the box, at the damning letter, at the will. The truth was a bomb and I was holding the detonator. I had to tell him. I had to destroy everything we had just started to rebuild. Clara. Sarah called again. I took a ragged breath. Yes, I said, my voice strangely calm. I found them. I'll bring them to him myself. The walk from the foundation to Vance Technologies was a blur. The city sounds, the blare of horns, the rush of footsteps, muffled into a dull roar as if I were moving through water. In my hands I carried a simple cardboard file folder. Inside it was not the patent history Jasper had asked for, but the two documents that could detonate our lives. My father's will and his final, devastating letter. Each step felt leaden. The words from the letter burned behind my eyes. The real work, the genius, was his. I transferred the patents to Evum to protect them. They are yours. My father's intention might have been protection, but it felt like theft. A final, catastrophic gift from beyond the grave. I didn't take the car. I needed the time, the cold air on my face, to try and steady the earthquake inside me. How could I tell him? How could I look the man I had already betrayed so profoundly in the eye and tell him that the empire he had built, the identity he had forged from nothing, was partially built on sand I now owned? That my father, the benevolent benefactor he'd once respected, had been a thief? I arrived at the gleaming tower of advanced tech, my heart hammering against my ribs. The receptionist knew me by now and waved me through with a smile that felt like an accusation. The elevator ride to the top floor was a slow ascent into my own personal hell. Sarah, Jasper's assistant, looked up as I stepped off the elevator. "Mrs. Thorne. Perfect timing. He's just wrapping up another call. You can go right in." I nodded, unable to speak, and pushed open the heavy door to his corner office. Jasper was at his desk, silhouetted against the panoramic view of the city, speaking into his headset. "Understood. Yes, have the final contracts on my desk by 5. The Singapore team expects precision." He sounded calm, authoritative, utterly in control. He was at the pinnacle of his success, moments from sealing a deal that would cement his legacy. He ended the call and looked up, a faint, tired smile touching his lips when he saw me. It was the first genuine smile he'd given me in weeks, and it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "Clara. Hey. Did you find the files?" He leaned back in his chair, stretching slightly. "Those old patent histories could be the final nail in the coffin. Prove our proprietary tech has a lineage they can't challenge." I stood frozen in the middle of the room, the folder clutched to my chest like a shield. His smile faded as he took in my expression. "What's wrong? Is it Ben? Is he okay?" "Ben's fine," I managed to say, my voice a dry croak. "Then what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." He stood up, concern etching his features as he came around the desk. He was right. I had seen a ghost. The ghost of my father's sins, and they were haunting us both. "I didn't find the patent histories you were looking for," I said, the words feeling thick and clumsy. "That's all right," he said dismissively. "It was a long shot. We can proceed without." "I found something else," I interrupted, my voice gaining a sliver of strength born of sheer desperation. I held out the folder. He looked at it, then at my face, his brow furrowed in confusion. He took it from me, his fingers brushing against mine. A jolt like a static shock passed between us. He walked back to his desk, opening the folder. He picked up the will first, scanning it quickly. I saw the moment his legal brain comprehended it. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. "Clara, what is this? This changes everything. The company, there could be assets, liabilities." He was thinking like a CEO, assessing the damage, the opportunities. "Keep reading," I whispered, my arms wrapped tightly around myself. He put the will down and picked up the letter. I watched his face as he read my father's words. I saw the confusion first, then the dawning comprehension, and finally, a slow, horrifying realization that drained the color from his face. His hands began to shake. The paper rattled softly in the silent room. He read it once, then again, as if hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. When he finally looked up, the expression in his eyes was unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't just anger. It was a profound, world-shattering betrayal. The carefully constructed control he was famous for evaporated completely. "Even Innovations," he whispered, the name sounding like a curse on his lips. He looked at me, his gaze sharp enough to cut glass. "You knew." "I just found it today," I said, the tears I'd been holding back finally spilling over. "Minutes before Sarah called. I was going to tell you. I swear, Jasper, I didn't know." "Your father," he said, his voice low and trembling with a fury so intense it was barely contained. "Your father stole my work. The project I bled for. The project that shitstain of a manager took credit for. Your father didn't just take credit, he stole the intellectual property. He hid it away for his little girl." He said the last 2 words with a venom that made me flinch. He picked up the letter again, his eyes scanning the page. The real work, the genius, was his. He read my father's words back to me with a savage, mocking twist. "He knew. He knew it was mine, and he took it anyway. And he left it to you." He threw the letter down on the desk as if it had burned him. He took a step back, running both hands through his hair, a ragged, disbelieving laugh escaping him. "Do you have any idea what this means? The Singapore merger? The entire valuation of advanced tech? It's predicated on the exclusive proprietary ownership of that technology. The technology that, according to this, belongs to you." He stared at me, his chest heaving. "All of it. Everything I've built. It's not mine. It's yours. You could pull the rug out from under me with a single word to my board. You could destroy me. I would never do that." I cried, taking a step toward him. Why not? He roared, the sound echoing off the glass walls. You've done it before. You decided my future for me once without consulting me. Why not again? Is this your backup plan, Clara? If this marriage thing doesn't work out, you can just repossess my company. The accusation was so unfair, so brutal that it stole the breath from my lungs. How can you say that? I brought this to you the moment I found it. And what a touching moment of honesty, he shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. After years of lies, you finally deigned to tell me the truth when it's literally placed in your hands. Do you want a medal for basic decency? He paced behind his desk, a caged animal. By God, the irony is so perfect it's sickening. I married you out of some misguided sense of chivalry. To save the poor, abandoned single mother. And the whole time you were sitting on a gold mine. You were never the damsel in distress, Clara. You were the dragon sitting on the goddamn hoard. His words were designed to eviscerate, and they did. Each one landed with the precision of a scalpel, cutting away at the fragile new connection we'd started to form. That's not true, I pleaded, my voice breaking. You know that's not true. I didn't know. But your father did, he yelled, slamming his hand on the desk, making me jump. Your father, the great Alistair Evans, looked at the brilliant, poor scholarship student and saw an opportunity. He saw something he could take and give to his daughter. He never saw me as a person. I was just a resource. And you, he looked at me, and the betrayal in his eyes was absolute. You were the ultimate instrument of his theft. His living, breathing safety deposit box. The cruelty of his interpretation was breathtaking. But I could see the logic of his pain, the path his mind was taking. His deepest insecurities, that he was never enough, that he was just a resource to people like me, were being confirmed in the most horrific way possible. Jasper, please, I sobbed, sinking into the chair opposite his desk, my strength gone. Please, you have to believe me. I am as horrified by this as you are. I would never. I will sign it all over to you. Right now. The patents, the shares, everything. It's yours. It was always yours. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his expression unreadable. Why? Out of pity? Because you feel guilty? I don't want your guilt, Clara. I never did. Because it's the right thing to do. I cried, desperation clawing at me. Because I love you. Because this, I gestured wildly at the documents on his desk, changes nothing about how I feel about you or the fact that I was wrong or that I want to fix this. He was silent for a long moment, just staring at me as I wept. The anger seemed to drain out of him again, leaving behind a hollowed-out shell of a man. It changes everything, he said quietly, his voice flat and exhausted. It proves that my worst fears were right all along. That I was never meant to have any of this. That it was all just borrowed. On loan from the Evans family. He walked to the window, turning his back on me. You need to leave, Clara. Jasper. Leave, he said, his voice firm, devoid of all emotion. I have a merger to try and save. And I need to do it alone. The finality in his tone was absolute. I had brought him the truth, and it had shattered us more completely than any lie ever could. I pushed myself up from the chair, my legs weak. I looked at his broad back, at the man who had fought for everything he had, only to have the foundation revealed as a lie. I had done that. My family had done that. I turned and walked out of his office, past a concerned-looking Sarah, into the elevator and out into the cold city air. I walked home, the distance feeling infinite. The beautiful house, my gilded cage, now felt like a monument to a crime. He didn't come home that night. Or the next. I was alone with the devastating truth and the crushing certainty that this time, I had lost him for good. The bomb had detonated and there was nothing left but rubble. 3 days. 72 hours of a silence so profound it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. The chef came and went, preparing meals that congealed on their plates. The driver sat idle in the driveway. Ben, sensitive to the seismic shift in the atmosphere, became quiet and clingy, his usual bright chatter replaced by whispered questions. Where's Daddy? Is he coming back? I had no answers for him. I had no answers for myself. I destroyed it. I had handed Jasper the truth like a weapon, and he had used it to annihilate what was left of us. His words echoed in the cavernous silence of our home. It proves that my worst fears were right all along. I had not just broken his heart. I had confirmed his deepest insecurity, that he was and always would be an outsider in the world he had conquered. On the fourth morning, a courier arrived with a thick legal-sized envelope addressed to me. My hands trembled as I tore it open. It wasn't divorce papers as my panic had immediately assumed. It was a proposal. A dry, clinical document outlining the transfer of all intellectual property rights from EVM Innovations to Vance Technologies, for the sum of $1. Attached was a post-it note in Jasper's precise handwriting. Clara, this resolves the legal matter. The Singapore merger proceeds. The board need never know. The house is yours. The foundation is yours. A trust has been established for Ben's future. I will not fight you for anything. It was the coldest, most final thing he could have done. He was giving me everything, and in doing so he was pushing me away completely. He was refusing my apology, my attempt to make it right. He was choosing to see himself as the indebted one, the recipient of my charity, all over again. He was walking away from the mess because he believed he never should have been in the picture to begin with. A white-hot fury ignited in my chest, burning away the grief and despair. Oh, absolutely not. He didn't get to do this. He didn't get to martyr himself and abandon us, abandoning Ben because his pride was more important than our family. I stormed into his study, the note crumpled in my fist. I didn't know where he was, but this was his space, and I was filled with a desperate, furious energy. I yanked open drawers, not even sure what I was looking for. A clue, an address, anything. In the bottom drawer of his desk, tucked beneath financial reports, my fingers brushed against cold, familiar metal. I pulled it out. It was a small, fireproof lockbox. I knew the combination. It was Ben's birthday. I lifted the lid. Inside wasn't stock certificates or passports. It was a pile of memories. The ticket stub from the first movie we'd seen together. A dried, pressed flower I'd stupidly given him after our first fight. And at the bottom a small, worn velvet box. I opened it. Inside, nestled on the satin, was the butterfly ring. The one I'd thrown away in a fit of manufactured cruelty. He'd found it. He'd kept it. All these years. Next to it lay a newer, more elegant ring. A solitaire diamond. An engagement ring he'd never gotten to give me. My fury dissolved, replaced by a heartbreak so acute it was physical. He had loved me. Through all of it, the lies, the years apart, he had held on to these tiny, broken pieces of us. He wasn't a ruthless tycoon cutting his losses. He was a heartbroken man who believed he was doing the noble thing by setting us free, by giving us the life he thought we deserved, even if it meant removing himself from the picture. He was repeating history. Just as I had left him to save him, he was now leaving us to save us from the taint of his perceived unworthiness. I couldn't let him. I didn't know where he was, but I knew where he would be. The one place that had always been his, long before the money and the power. I left Ben with the nanny, giving her strict instructions to call me if Jasper contacted her. Then I got in the car and told the driver to take me to the old university district. The coffee shop was still there, though it was part of a chain now, slicker and more generic. I pushed the door open, the bell jingling a familiar sound. And there he was. Not in a suit. In a simple gray Henley and jeans, sitting at the same small table in the corner where he used to study between shifts. He had a laptop open, but he was just staring out the window, a cup of coffee cooling in front of him. He looked younger and utterly defeated. He didn't see me at first. I walked over and stood by his table, my shadow falling across his screen. He looked up, and the shock on his face was quickly masked by a weary resignation. "Clara, what are you doing here?" I slid into the seat opposite him, placing the velvet box containing both rings on the table between us. His eyes flicked down to it and a muscle jumped in his jaw. "You don't get to do this, Jasper," I said, my voice low but steady. "Do what?" he said flatly. "Give you what's rightfully yours?" "This isn't about what's rightful," I said, my composure cracking. "This is about you running away. You're so determined to be the tragic, self-sacrificing hero that you're blind to what you're actually sacrificing. You're sacrificing us. You're sacrificing your son." "I'm giving you security," he insisted, his own voice rising, drawing a glance from the barista. "I'm giving you a life without the mess of me and my borrowed legacy." "I don't want a life without the mess of you," I cried. "The mess is the point. The mess is real. This," I gestured around the shiny coffee shop, "this clean, easy, packaged life you're trying to give me is a lie. The truth is messy and painful and complicated. My father was a flawed man who did a terrible thing for what he thought was a good reason. I was a scared girl who made a catastrophic choice because I thought I was protecting you. And you are a proud, stubborn man who would rather walk away than accept that someone else's mistake might have accidentally helped him. I reached across the table, grabbing his hand before he could pull away. His fingers were cold. You built Vance Tech, Jasper. Not my father. Your mind, your work, your relentless drive. The patents are just paper. You are the genius. You always were. My father saw that. He was a thief, but he wasn't a fool. He knew it was yours. He knew it was worth stealing because it was brilliant. And it's still brilliant. The Singapore merger is happening because of you. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't care. I am not my father. I am not giving you charity. I am giving you back what is already yours. But I am keeping what is mine. I am keeping you. I am keeping our family. And if you try to leave because your pride is more important than our son's happiness, than my love for you, then you are a coward. And the Jasper Thorne I fell in love with was never a coward. I was breathless, my heart pounding. I had laid everything bare. There was nothing left. Jasper was staring at our joined hands, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, filled only by the hiss of the espresso machine. Finally he spoke, his voice so low I had to lean forward to hear it. You called me a coward. Yes. He looked up and his eyes were glistening. No one has ever dared to call me that. Someone needed to, I whispered. He was silent for another long moment, his thumb absently stroking the back of my hand. The ring, he said finally, nodding to the box. You kept it. I never stopped loving you, I said. Not for a single day. Leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. Living without you was a half-life. Coming back and seeing you, loving you again has been the most terrifying and wonderful thing I've ever experienced. I am not letting you go without a fight, Jasper Thorne. Not this time. A single tear escaped and traced a path down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. Ben asked me if the house felt icky when we were mad. I nodded, a sob catching in my throat. It did, he admitted, his voice rough. It felt like a museum. A very beautiful, very empty museum. He took a shaky breath. When I read that letter, it felt like the walls of the museum were closing in on me. It felt like I was being put back in my place. The scholarship student. The charity case. You are my husband, I said, squeezing his hand. You are Ben's father. That is your place. The only place that matters. He looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw the walls finally, truly begin to crumble. The anger, the pride, the hurt, it all melted away, leaving behind a raw, vulnerable man. I am so tired, Clara, he confessed, the words a soft surrender. I am so tired of fighting to prove I belong. I just want to belong. With you. You do, I said, leaning forward, pressing my forehead against his. You always have. We sat like that for a long time in the quiet corner of the coffee shop where it had all begun, two broken people finding their way back to each other in the ashes of the past. He picked up the velvet box and opened it. He took out the simple platinum band with the bird in flight. This was the first thing I ever bought you that I was truly proud of, he said. It wasn't much, but it was all mine. It was everything, I whispered. He slipped it onto my finger next to the wedding band he'd placed there weeks ago. It fit perfectly, a circle closed after 6 long years. Then he took out the diamond solitaire. This one is too, he said, his voice stronger now. No one else's. Just mine. For you. He held it out. Will you wear it? For real this time. I nodded, unable to speak, and he slid it onto my finger. It was a promise. A new beginning. A choice made not out of obligation or circumstance, but out of love, forged in the fire of truth. He stood up, pulling me to my feet. Let's go home, he said. Our son is waiting. And as we walked out of the coffee shop, hand in hand, the past finally felt like it was where it belonged, behind us. Not forgotten, but no longer holding us hostage. The future was still uncertain, still messy, but we would face it together. Not as the people we were, but as the people we had become. Scarred, stronger, and finally truly home. The end.